Your construction smells of corruption. Manipulates.
Happy holidays, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Cloud-Based Mayhem. I hope you are enjoying these final days of 2020. And I hope, like you, it'd be fun to look at this year in the rearview mirror. What a crazy year it has been. My guest today is Tim Pentreath. I met Tim up in the lakes a couple years ago. I was on tour with Ed Ewing with North and Known, and they scheduled a couple classes for me to teach. And we're calling it master classes. They were really based on hike and fly and bivvy, and Tim was one of my students. Well, that's kind of funny, though. He knows a lot more than I do. But he's been flying 30 years and regularly chases it on X Contest, and very well-known British pilot. And right after those classes, he took that class because he really wanted to get into bivvy. And after that, he certainly did. He's been doing some really cool lines with some other friends in the Alps with kind of no objective, just, having fun in the sky and doing it safely and covering ground. So this conversation is all about bivvy and gear and how to get into it and where are good places to go to practice and what are the kind of minimum skills you need. So we put out this survey quite a few weeks back on how we can improve the podcast, and many people asked for more shows on hike and fly and bivvy. So here you go. Enjoy this great talk, super fun talk with a good friend of mine, Tim Pentreath, and invite you all to go look at the show notes for this episode to see some of Tim's great videos. He's been documenting these bivvy trips he's been taking, and they're a lot of fun. So enjoy. Tim, so awesome to have you on the show. We met a few years back now. It's crazy how fast time flies, but we met up at the lakes doing a little hike and fly gig with Jockey and Ed Ewing at XC Mag. That was super fun. I can't wait to get back there. I've been watching all your videos and pictures of the amazing flying you guys do in the UK. And since that talk, and I don't know if maybe it was before that, but you've done some awesome bivvies in the Alps, and I know people have been following along those as I have, and so I can't wait to talk to you about that. But maybe a good place to start is just a brief, one page on your history of flying. How'd you get into this absurdity?
Hey, Gavin. Well, it's fantastic to talk to you. Thanks very much for inviting me on the show. Gosh, how did I get into it? Well, if you go through it all, it's probably more than a page because I've been flying for 30 years this year. I started in 1990.
Wow.
And yeah, I know, back in the dim and distant past.
What the hell was I doing teaching that course? We should have had you do it.
I don't know. Yeah, not quite as full on as you, I don't think. But yeah, I got into it. I used to do a lot of windsurfing, and back in those days, there was a windsurfing mag that I subscribed to, and it had an article about paragliding, how it was the ideal sort of light wind alternative to windsurfing. And I'd also seen it on telly. There's a French pilot, and I've forgotten his name, and it won't come back to me, I know, but he climbed three of the highest peaks in the Alps, or the three famous peaks in the Alps, and paraglided off all of them. And I think that was in the late 80s. And I must have seen that on, terrestrial telly. That was all there was at that time. And, that piqued my interest. And then when I saw this article in Boards magazine, that was it. Signed up there and then with a couple of mates, and the rest is history, I suppose.
I find it really interesting, this flow sport to flow sport thing. Will Gadd talks about that. In fact, I was just reading his chapter in the book. We're kind of editing that all up for release here shortly. And he was talking about, when people come from other flow sports to flying, it's often a pretty good transition. And when you're not, so say like climbing or triathlon or something, it can often be a really tough jump because the people that are into flow sports are attracted to flow sports. And because I did the same thing. I was a kite surfer before a pilot. And I think you also have that advantage of understanding the invisible quite a bit better. You understand how air works and how water works if you're a kayaker. I'm amazed by how fast kayakers get really good at flying.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with the, as you're saying, the flow sports, and you mentioned that on just one of your recent podcasts. And I've since become a kite surfer myself and sold all my old windsurfing kit for virtually nothing, sadly. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. Yeah, kayakers. Yeah, you've got the whole sort of water flow around, rocks, which is synonymous with the air. And I've been sailing and windsurfing and for years really, and just teaches you about the air, and you can react to those little shifts. Like especially when you're kite surfing, you're constantly on the bar in and out, just adjusting to minute, active flying. I suppose really, that's exactly what you're doing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, you're just the pendulum's maybe a little bit different, but it is active flying.
Yeah.
And when did so I can't even remember when we did the master's class was 20. It was after Alaska came out because that's what it was. It was really I was kind of touring with the film, so that must have been 2017, probably.
Oh, that's what I was going to say. 2017.
And were you already well into bivvy at that point, or was that kind of the launching ramp?
That was the launching ramp, really. I would, it'd been on my radar. It's one of those things that I'd thought about doing for quite a while, but had never really sort of plucked up courage to take that first step. And it was that later that summer that I did actually my first that was an overnight Vol Biv, but still Vol Biv, down in south of France.
What was the catalyst, really? I mean, was it just, okay, you'd done the comp scene, or was it just something you were looking for something different with flying?
Yeah, I've done quite a few British Open comps over the years, never taken it too seriously. I've always, for most of the time, was just on serial class gliders, sports class. And then I think it was probably 2017, I moved on to, no, I had a 3-liner before, but I moved up a level to a D class glider. Actually, having said that, I flew back in the day, I had a Nova Sphinx, which was that was my second ever glider, and I think that was '94. I got that, and that was a DHV 2.3 back in those days, which is equivalent of a D. But then I went back to C class gliders until I started getting into the Omega X Alps series. So yes, 2017. I was still doing comps, but I just felt there was more to it and just wanted to do some more adventurous stuff, really.
Go ahead, what?
I was going to say, it's just the freedom that it gives you when you're not constrained by, retrieves or getting back to the car. That's what's so liberating about Vol Biv.
And what was the, later that year when you did the one night, but when you decided to head over to the Alps and do your first big one there, what was the preparation like? What did you feel like you had to kind of figure out beforehand?
Well, on that one, that was in 2018, and so the one day one the year before was, I'd been down for 4 or 5 days staying with a friend, Nigel Cooper, down in St Andre, and he knows that area like the back of his hand, and I know it pretty well from quite a few comps over the years. So on that one, it was just basic kit. I don't even think I had a stove for that one. I think he just, we just used his little stove. So that was if you like, a proving ground. I borrowed someone's air mattress, which went down in the night. I had a bivvy bag, no tent or anything like that. And it rained for about, actually only 20 minutes. We were incredibly lucky because there were thunderstorms all around us. Sleep was a little bit hard to come by that night, but just for one night you can put up with it. So that was a sort of trialing ground. But I mean, I suppose in terms of preparation for the next trip, again, I did it with Nigel actually. So we had a sort of vague plan of where we wanted to go. In terms of kit, yeah, I mean, that's one of the fun things about it, isn't it? Just sort of spending days, weeks, months, sort of poring over kit and, looking at videos and getting stuff from AliExpress, cheap tents and the like. And that's all part of the fun, I think, for most people, doing that kit research.
Yeah, I like, it's funny to think back. There's that scene in the Alaska film where I'm like, I can't believe we forgot gators. We had 6 years to prepare for this thing. I mean, I had my stuff laid out for that trip in, like January. I've got this sunroom in the back of the house, and okay, well that's got to go. Okay, well that can come out. Just tweaking and tweaking and tweaking for months, and then we get up there and no gators. Yeah, it's just it's pretty funny. Schoolboy era for sure. Yeah, absolutely. Well, take us down the road for where did you go? Where did you end up? How was your approach? What I kind of want to fleece out a little bit is just, for those that are embarking or thinking about embarking on their first bivvy, what are kind of the critical things? What do people need to know? What do they not need to know? What do they need to be concerned about?
I mean, I would say don't overthink it too much, really. But you want to, especially if you're going to the Alps to do it. But I mean, you could just, here in the UK, you could have a simple 1 or 2 night bivvy in the mountains of South Wales or the hills. You're not going to fly hundreds of kilometers, obviously, but you don't have to have fun. You can fly 20 or 30 kilometers and have a hike and then a camp, and then so it's all don't make it too much of a big thing, I think, is the overall message. I mean, if you're going to the Alps, you have to plan it a bit more. But again, you might have this great trip planned, from one side of the Alps to the other. But at the end of the day, it's just a series of flights and hikes. And in the Alps, especially, there's always places to find water and food. So you don't need to carry too much with you. Yeah, does that answer that question?
Yeah, I'm thinking about too. Like, are you still using a bivvy sack? Are you just using a tarp? Are you using a tent? How heavy is your gear? Drill down a little bit more on the gear you're using for these Alps trips.
Sure. So I do actually have a kit list as a Google sheet, so I can.
Oh, great! We'll share that in the show notes. We'll put that in there.
But just to sort of run through some of the things I use. I mean, because I think in the Alps, especially, you're not in the middle of nowhere. There's always places you can find shelter if the weather is terrible. I haven't gone for a particularly expensive tent at all. In fact, far from it. The tent, I use a tent now rather than a tarp or a bivvy bag. It's one called 3F Ultralight, and I can't remember the model name, but yeah, it's like 60 quid from on AliExpress. It's just a single skin, but use one of your walking poles as the main sort of central pole. But it's fine. I mean, I'm 6'4"-ish, 6'3", and I can fit in it. So yeah, that does the job, and it's waterproof, which is all you want for. You wouldn't want to spend all day in it, of course, but
right.
Yeah. So it's not like if I was doing a trip like one of yours, the Alaskan one, you want something a bit better for sure.
Yeah, it's interesting because I've gotten a lot of comments over the years, both from the Rockies one and the Alaska one. Why were you guys carrying so much gear and it looks so heavy? And you could have done this and you could have done this. And my feeling around bivvy is that we're not racing. It's not the X Alps that I've put all this energy into putting together this trip. I'm not trying to make it end. I want to be out there. And like you say, I'm never trying to crunch kilometers on bivvy. I mean, of course, if you're gift wrapped a beautiful day, then take advantage of it, go for it. But, to me, it's about I love the camping and the tramping and the, just watching the sunsets. I'm not in a hurry. And so, and then the flip side of that is I want to eat really well, and I want to be super comfortable, and I want a tent that I can sit up in and listen to podcasts and write in my journal. And I guess I find that it's better to put a little bit more effort into being fit and like I like my little espresso maker. I love that stuff because you've got all this time. If you wake up in the
Yeah.
morning and you're just like, oh, we just got to go. Well, then of course you can go a lot lighter, but you can go Alps style for sure. But I don't know. I'm never in a hurry, and I just don't mind carrying the extra weight. And then if you carry the extra weight, you need better food, and I often find you are a little bit sleep compromised. And so, food and being comfortable helps.
Yeah, you're right there. I mean, the most expensive bit of my kit is the mattress, the air mattress, the air bed. And so I've got a Thermarest Neo Air, which
those are great. I've got one too.
Yeah, which is really good. It's nice and warm, and it does the trick. And for up until this year, I just used my glider to sleep under, and then we had this discussion with some friends about pros and cons of sleeping bag versus a quilt versus sleeping under your wing. And this year I sacrificed, talking about coffee makers, I ditched my little espresso machine, my little mocha thing, and instead used the weight to I bought a quilt, a down quilt, and that was really nice and comfortable. Actually, that was perfect. I don't like the feeling of being zipped up in a tight sleeping bag, but a quilt was just worked really well.
Oh, interesting. So what I do is I have a really good sleeping bag. And now if it's a summer bivvy, then I can go to a much warmer bag. By that, I mean a warmer rated bag, and down. But I have a down bag that's like a 0 degree bag for something like Alaska. But then when I add to that, and again, this is extra weight, but I just have a silk liner, it's like a little mini, it's like another sleeping bag. And then, because if you're going for days and days and days, you're kind of gross, and that just keeps your bag nicer. And it's also just really comfy. It's kind of, but that's a little bit on the plush end of things for sure. But a quilt's a good idea. I hadn't thought about that. That's a great idea. I mean, this whole sleeping in your wing sucks, or sleeping. What I do with, you're totally right about the pad. You got to have a pad. And what I do is put the pad, I still put the wing underneath the pad, so I kind of a thin little pad, and then it's just extra, but then it's not making the noise, and it's just a little bit extra cushion. I'm getting old. I need the cushion.
Yeah, I haven't tried putting the wing under it. I know a friend of mine did on one of the trips, but it seems like actually sleeping on top of your wing is going to be squashing it, and if you
totally.
Turning over 3 or 4 times or an hour, which I seem to do, you're probably going to end up trashing it. So yeah, I haven't done that. What else?
Are you guys cooking a lot? How are you handling your food? Because that's always a big kind of Achilles heel for folks. It's that part's that's tricky because food's heavy.
Yeah, I carried about this most recent trip. I think about 7 or 8 days worth of food, which was a bit overkill, really. I had a few, quite a few packets left, and so I had those. Those ones you just open the packet and you pour in boiling water. Yeah. I mean, I think the brand I've got is called Adventure Foods, and it's fine. In fact, it's more than fine. It's so convenient. There's no washing up to do, which you obviously don't want to waste water. It's just pour it in, wait 8 minutes, stir it up, and eat it. Basically, stir it up before you wait the 8 minutes. And it is a surprisingly nourishing food. So that was a sort of evening meal. Breakfast, I had a tip from Greg Hamilton, the Pro Nutra, sort of South African protein cereal. He recommended. And I sort of pre-mixed portions of that with a bit of milk powder and put it into individual little plastic bags and carry about, one of those for breakfast and, a few spare ones, just as, extra food if I needed it. And the only trouble with them is, my wife and kids were totally winding me up the very first time I did it, because it looked very suspicious. These packets of sort of white and brown substances. They were saying, "How are you going to get that through the customs?"
Yeah, I've had that one.
Past the sniffer dog. But I mean, yeah. I'd recommend that stuff. You get banana flavor, you get chocolate flavor, and it's very easy, and it worked out super cheap for just a breakfast.
Yeah, what I started doing, this seemed to work pretty well, was I would just take a Ziploc with the powdered milk and mix in a bunch of brown sugar. And that would be my, that'd be for my cereal or for my coffee, if you like sweetened coffee, which usually I just do cream or something. But that was kind of a nice way to get rid of a bag and just have one thing, a little bit more calories, a little more glycose, which is good.
Yeah.
And then I changed my coffee from when you just do the pour over coffee through a paper filter, and then you huck the paper filter. This is just a permanent one of those. It's just a metal mesh one, so it fits down in my pot really perfectly, and I could just put the coffee in there, and then then there's no trash. There's nothing to burn. It's kind of nice. You just reuse it.
Yeah. I took some coffee bags this last time, and didn't actually use as many of them as I thought I would, but they were great, actually. Very tasty. But yeah, someone's given me a little sort of plastic mesh thing that you can just tip coffee into, and then dunk that in your cup of boiling water, just like a tea bag. So I'll give that a go, because actually those coffee bags are quite expensive.
So this first one you did in 2018, where did you start and where did you end, and what were kind of the highlights?
I mean, it was basically from Calder Blaine I started, and then I met up with Nigel en route. I mean, that first day was just ridiculous, really. I left home at something like 3:00 in the morning. I live in Bath in the UK. Caught a flight from Bristol Airport, which is about an hour's drive away, to Nice. So I arrived at Nice at about 10:30 in the morning, and a friend of mine, Marcus King, he met me there at Nice Airport, which is very kind of him, drove me up to Calder Blaine, and we were at Calder Blaine takeoff for sort of midday. By 12:30, I was in the air heading north, and I met Nigel sort of on the Dormelouse Ridge. He was, he'd been flying from Saint Andre, and we met up, crossed over the Lac de Serpenson together, and we just had an epic flight. And we landed high above the ski resort of Orsières, and so it's just, how can that be possible to be at home at 3:00 in the morning, and then that evening you're camping on a French mountaintop? It was just incredible, and especially after an epic flight, like 120 kilometers or something, I think it was. Just amazing.
And that zone, I mean, describe it for those who haven't flown it, because I've just got the hugest grin on my face ever, because I've spent quite a bit of time down in that, in the Maritimes. It's just, it's epic down there. Describe kind of what the scenery is like. I think people don't understand how big it is.
Yeah, I mean, it's not as big as, the Alps further north, the Northern Alps, but they're still plenty great big mountains compared to what you see in the UK, clearly. And by the time you work your way up the Dormelouse, you've gone past some pretty big peaks. You've gone past the Tête de l'Estrop, which is, I don't know offhand, but it must be around about 3,000 meters. And the terrain up to there it's pretty rocky and rugged, and you got some serious boonies once you go, once you've gone sort of 20k north of Saint Andre, you've got about, I would say, another 20k of pretty boony countryside. Then you get onto the Dormelouse Ridge, and then you've got the Lac de Serpenson, which is beautiful. Just, by the time you get there, it's in the afternoon, you've got the sun sparkling on the waters, and it's bright blue waters. And the other side of the lake, you've got the Écrins, which have got some very big peaks, up to 4,000 meters. it's pretty mind blowing, really.
What time was this?
It's
June?
spectacular. No, this was. It would have been that this trip was early July, actually, 2018. Yeah, I think it was like might have been the first week of July.
Were you dealing with much? Were you dealing with much valley wind then, or was it pretty good?
Well, it just depends where you are, really. The flight up from Saint Andre up to the Dormalus, not really valley winds to contend with. The terrain's a bit more sort of, how should we say, a bit more random. It's not particularly organised. When you get to cross the lake, you get quite a strong westerly wind there.
Ecrins can rock up to Briançon and all that zone. That can be windy.
Yeah, and up the Briançon Valley, you get quite a strong valley wind, I'm told. So yeah, it's in places for sure. It's windy, but it's the obvious places where you have the valleys leading into the higher mountains. On that trip, for the next day we flew. We took the roundabout route out towards Grenoble rather than sort of
deep.
What do you call it? A tiger line, straight north through the Ecrins. That's a dream for another year.
Yeah,
maybe next year. But yeah, we're with the sort of traditional route, and then the second night Nigel and I camped. Well, we'd had a lovely flight. We'd done 60 kilometers or something, and there was some big clouds building, and we just flew over this beautiful spot it's called Taillefer, the Massif de Taillefer, and it's sort of not far from Grenoble, really. And you fly over these sort of peaks, and then you've got a plateau dotted with little lakes, and it was just magnificent. So we decided to call it a day after sort of 60k, and found a beautiful spot to land right by the lake. And the very first thing I did, I got out, I landed 50 yards from the lake, I suppose, and dumped my glider, dumped everything, and I'd had an accident with the P tube. It just completely so I totally pissed my trousers, and just dived straight in the lake. It was beautiful.
Nice.
The water was fantastic. So yeah, so sorted out those little challenge, shall we say, and then rinse the harness down.
All done that.
And then got on with the business of pitching the tent and folding up the glider and stuff like that. But yeah, what a perfect spot that was. Really nice.
And what was I'll let you keep going with the rest of it, but just before you keep going with the rest of this trip, though, what was the style of it? What did you and Nigel agreed to beforehand? Was there you're staying together no matter what, or you're going as far as you can, or did you have, like, when you wake up in the morning, did you have an objective, or did you just let's just go flying?
We had originally sort of planned to try and get to Chamonix and maybe further into Switzerland, but actually after on day two on that flight we completely changed our plan because the weather further north was looking unsettled. So we ended up sort of doing a triangle around the outside of the Ecrins. The next day we flew over towards Briançon. In fact, we landed in Briançon, and then the following day we flew back down to Saint Andre. So that was just a fairly shortest trip. So we had no fixed objective. We were prepared to change plans in the air, and change plans from day to day. That's a great thing. You just go with the flow, really. I think, if you set out to do a trip to fly the whole length of the Alps, and you realise the weather was really pretty poor further north, then you could still have a brilliant week flying around the Ecrins and the Alps Maritimes. There's plenty to fill your boots there.
Yeah, and how did you guys how did you guys meet in the air that first day? Like, well, actually, let me rewind. Were these dates just set? You're going no matter what to Nice, or is it the kind of thing
Yeah,
because you're in
yeah.
the UK, you can just pull the weather looks good, let's go.
Well, you could do that, but we no, most times you do have to sort of actually pick a date, and just sort of stick with it unless it's really poor. And in fact, that I need to go back to how we met in the air, but that brings me on to sort of this year's trip, where there was 8 of us who met up in Saint Andre, and we met up on the Sunday. This is sort of end of July this time, and the forecast really wasn't that great. The first 2 days down in the Alpes Maritime were forecast to be pretty windy, and then unsettle further north. And we were having these discussions: do we go? Don't we go? And I think if I'd been on my own, I probably would have bailed on it. But actually, when we were there, the first day's flying, Monday, we had a fantastic day flying, 100k north. Second day was great too. So it just goes to show, really, you've got to sort of be there. Got to be in it to win it, I think, is what they say.
Yeah, and I mean, I think there's also there's a lot to be said for kind of, I call this the Nick Nanon's approach. He does bivvies all over the world. It doesn't have to. It can be a long ways from Bangor. You can get a little 10K glide over Morning Glory in the morning, and that's your flying day, and it's epic. You're out. You've just taken a flight you probably never would have as an experienced pilot, because it's not that good. It's not a day to go flying, but it's totally safe, and it's really, really, really pretty, and you get to spend the day in the mountains. And so you can do a lot with bivvy. That's what I love about it so much.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. It's all, whatever you do is some sort of adventure, isn't it? You're not. It's the flying is fantastic, and yeah, it would be pretty upsetting to spend a week and just get 10k glides in every day, rather than any sort of proper cross country flights. But I'm sure if that did happen, you'd still have fun. It'd still be a memorable trip. So yeah, it's more than just about the flying. It's the people you meet on the way and the places you see, the whole experience. Just going back to sort of how I met up with Nigel in flight. Pretty simple, really. He was using. I could see him. I use Fly Sky High as my sort of instrument of choice on my phone, and so that will display your friend's live track. Nigel was using. He doesn't use an iPhone. He was using XC Track, but yeah, he had a Live Track 24 app on his phone, so I could basically see him on my phone, and I knew where he was. I could see him.
Were you guys using radios too, or just that?
Yeah, we did. We did when we got closer. Yeah.
Oh, wicked! That's pretty sexy. That's good.
Yeah, it worked fine. It was really good. Yeah. I mean, plus I think I probably messaged him using Telegram whilst I was in the air, saying I've taken off or something. Yeah, so he would have got that as well.
Let's pause on this real quickly. What have you got with you electronically?
Yeah, so I mean, got the cameras and that sort of stuff. So the GoPro is what I had this year. Previously, I've had a cheap Chinese equivalent, which actually was more reliable, I should say. But
get a Garmin, man. Get a Garmin. They're so much better. I have to plug them. Their Verb is a lot better than the GoPro. Yeah, it's really nice.
Yeah. Oh well, I've got to make this GoPro investment last a little bit longer. But
yeah,
maybe,
right. Of course.
So yeah, I've got that radio. This year I bought the little stand for the charging stand for the radio, and a little step up transformer cable to make it work off USB, because it's not a USB radio. It's a few years older. But in terms of instruments and flight deck, I've got the Garmin InReach Mini, So that's really nice to have that and to have the tracking on. I've got on my Vario, I had a XE Tracer 2 Flam, just a bit of reassurance to know that all those sailplanes buzzing around you down in the Alps are gonna know you're there. And yeah, just my phone and a battery, of course, but a phone running Fly Sky High. So yeah, well, and to charge it all, an Anker solar power pack.
How big is do you know the wattage of the solar panel?
It's 15 watts.
15, so it's pretty good size. Okay.
Yeah, it's got two panels. And actually, the way I did it, I've got two of the Anker 10,000 milliamp batteries.
Yeah.
So I had, they both start off fully charged. After the first day, one's getting low. So the next day, I'll charge up that one whilst I'm flying, and use the fresh one, on my flight deck.
Where do you hang the panel when you're flying?
Yes, I had to do a bit of experimentation to get this working properly. But yeah, it's tied onto basically not the sort of carabiners, but close to the carabiners. And then I have it folded out on my legs. But I tried it once in the UK before the trip, and every time I put the speed bar on, or every time I went a little bit faster, it would just blow up in my face. So I ended up putting a little bit of elastic round, from the bottom corners of it, around my legs, around the pod, just to keep it in place. And that worked really well. Obviously, you got to be extra careful when you're setting up ready that you haven't got any lines caught in this bit of elastic. But that worked really well.
And what wing and what harness?
So I've now got the Omega X Alps 3.
Okay.
So a 2-liner. And I've got the Lightness 3.
Okay.
And it's a fantastic combination, really. I got the X Alps 3 last summer, so summer 2019, and it arrived 2 days before my planned, Vol Biv in 2019. I was umming and ahhing because I had the Oxa 2, X Alps 2, which is a 3-liner. So do I take the one I know, or do I take the brand new 2-liner? Luckily, I had an hour's flight on it on my local site on the day before I was due to fly out. And having had that, hour's flight, I thought, right, you've got to take the new one, really. And I spoke to Greg Hamilton as well, who also had one, and he said, yeah, you've got to take the new one. So yeah, that was a great decision.
His advice when I had him on the show was that when you're going bivvy or going light, so either one, you should step down. You should, if you're normally flying a 2-liner END, it's probably best to go down to an ENC, maybe even a high-end ENC or mid-level ENC or something for when you're going light, either light gear or if you're going bivvy. Do you agree with that?
I think as a general rule, yeah. I mean, it's pretty sensible because it's not all about the flying. Whether you do 90K or 100K, if you had a 2-liner, you might do a little bit further, but it's not that important. You're not racing anyone. It's just the views and the experience that you're after. But I mean, not everyone has the luxury of having 2 wings, special a lightweight wing. I've just got the one glider, and I've only ever had one glider at a time. So it's you take what you've got basically.
Sure.
And for me, I've been flying 30 years, and I've gone from the Oxa 1 to the 2, and now the 3. Going from a 3-liner D to a 2-liner D, it didn't feel like a step up in how it handles in difficulty or anything like that. It was, if anything, it's sort of easier to fly. So yeah, I think for me, it's a lovely wing
nice sweet spot
on a Volvo trip. Yeah, I mean, for sure, if I'd had something like a Yotta 2, Not the Odyssey, the Z. And I should mention that I didn't do this in my sort of bio at the beginning, but I've been an advanced ambassador and advanced XC serial team pilot since 2014. So yeah, I'm like advanced kit.
Yeah.
But that's enough of that sort of plugging. But yes, I would have had just as much fun on an advanced Z or any other sort of lightweight wing, really. But for me, having the two-liner is lovely, especially in such a light form factor.
The lightness, does that have a carbon seat board, or is it just a hammock?
It's just a hammock. Yeah.
And anything you want to say about that? 30 years of flying, imagine you spent most of that time flying a seat board. Was there much adjustment? Was there much getting used to it? Any pluses, minuses?
Actually, prior to the Lightness 3, I had a Lightness 2, which is also a hammock one, and prior to that, I had a Impress 3, which was also a hammock one. So I hadn't had a seat board since my Impress 2, which is quite a long time ago. So, but the very first time I went in the Impress 3, yes, I was quite taken aback about how much feedback it gave you. But the designs in the lightness range of, the 3 is more, what do you say, roll stable, I guess, than the 2. But even the 2 was fine. So I personally like the comfort of just having the hammock. Just don't feel I need. I don't feel a seat board will give me any more. I'm quite happy with the hammock as it is.
And how do you pack it? Is that, because when let's see, I'm trying to remember what I had in Sup Air. I had the Delight 2, I believe, but I had to, it has a pad. And so I had to remove, to make space, I removed the back pad. Actually, no, it was one system. So I had no pad. It was, so I was real careful about how I put everything in terms of the sleeping bag and the sleeping pad under my butt. I tried to get most of the soft stuff under my butt. But is that lightness? Does that have plenty of space? Is it an airbag, or can you just pack around it, or do you have to remove stuff?
So there is a massive compartment right underneath the seat, which is when you're just doing normal XC flying or whatever. It's got this big foam cushion in. So once I realized how easy it was to take that out, I in that compartment, I could put my tent, my sleeping quilt, my mattress, a poncho, and a couple of other things as well. So, it's all this nice soft stuff, so that it probably gives you, as good a protection as in there anyway.
Sure.
So so that gets rid of all that sort of soft, bulky stuff. Food, and the sort of food is quite heavy. That I got most of that in the sort of ballast compartment, which is underneath your legs, at the front of the pod, and that left the back compartment. So on the Lightness 3, actually, it's got a foam layer, and then it's got Sastec, a sort of slightly harder, more plasticky, more rigid protection. So I took that latter bit out, the Sastec bit out, and just left the foam in there. And then you shove everything else in there. So there was sufficient storage. There was not. There's probably harnesses that are better suited for doing longer Vol Bivs for sure, but for a week, 10 days, 2 weeks, Lightness 3 is absolutely fine. And the Lightness 2s as well. They're pretty much identical, really, in terms of capacity, I think.
And what do you use for a rucksack?
I just got the standard one that comes with the
Lightness.
With the Lightness.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's pretty good. It's got nice side pockets. And
do you know how big it is?
Yeah. It's a 90-liter one.
90-liter, okay. And that's plenty of space for your 7 days of food.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, sufficient. Everything has to be packed in pretty well.
You got to do a good job.
You can't just chuck it in. And And in fact, when I get to go flying normally in the UK, like I was flying just a couple of days ago for a little hours soaring, I was thinking, how do I get all my Vol Biv stuff in this? There doesn't seem to be much spare space in it. But once you actually pack it carefully, and you've taken out some of the padding, and it all fits in fine. Yeah.
And are you guys utilizing, grocery stores, huts? Are you ever trying to top land and spend a night in luxury, or is it all just kind of on the go?
The preference is landing high and sleeping on the mountaintop for me. I mean, that was that's what the whole experience is about, really. I like on this year's trip, one of the sort of best days for me actually was not the day. I had an amazing flight on one day, all the way from sort of Verbier down to Bellinzona. But then I landed low on that flight, landed in Goal at the Bellinzona landing field, and then had to find somewhere to camp in a sort of, slightly built up environment.
Yeah.
And after a bit, I did find quite a nice place, but it wasn't the same. The next day, I was expecting to have to do a lot of hiking because the weather forecast didn't seem that great. But actually, I did start hiking, walked about half an hour, then the sun started coming out. I thought, this is mad. So I turned around and actually, caught the gondola up to the takeoff at Mornera, I think it's called, of Bellinzona. And I ended up having a wicked, 100K flight. And I landed on this sort of plateau, had an hour's hike up to, I didn't know where it was, but it was called Monte Padrio. And just on my own up there, beautiful views all around, few goats knocking around with their sort of goat bells tinkling away. And that's the essence of it to me. So that day, I had fantastic flying, but the whole day was probably the best day, just because of the beauty of where you end up, camping.
So I got to hear about your flight from Verbier to Bellinzona, because that's exactly the opposite of my best day in the 2015 race that really put us back into it. 18th to 8th that day. I started in Bellinzona, and I actually hiked. It was really stable. We had a really brutal inversion. So I hiked, I don't know, another 1,000 above Mornier, from that night we were kind of in Bellinzona, and so hiked up way above that Mornier launch, up in those big mountains up behind you, and then flew to Verbier. That was back when the Matterhorn was a turn point. So through that zone, and then stayed really super tall and kind of floated into Verbier later that evening. And it was really strong headwind all day. So that was an exceptional day. But what was your route going the other way?
That sounds an awesome flight you described there.
Oh, it was unbelievable, because, and most of the, when I got into the Zermatt Valley and was pressing up into, it was a really windy day. This was not a record. That was a day that, Hansa and the Korean both flew in wave. The Korean got up to like 5,000 meters and was flying in wave. And, it was strong headwinds. So you were flying in the lee all day and just kind of pressing and then taking your hits and pressing. But when I got into the Zermatt Valley, everybody that it was in front of me, from Bellinzona, basically I just cut the corner and went straight through that kind of, there's the big sea that goes up to the Arolo and then the Newfoundland. And I just went straight across all that stuff. Just like, I got to take some risk here. There's no way we're going to get to Monaco. So knowing that if I bombed out, basically my race was over, but, so I just went straight, and then suddenly ended up kind of between the Simplon Pass and the Newfoundland Pass. And suddenly recognized where I was. I'm like, oh my God, I'm, one more move and I'm in the Zermatt Valley. Holy cow. And when I got in the Zermatt Valley, and there was, there's Guschelbauer. No, it wasn't Guschelbauer. Who was Ferdinand, and, all these guys that were way ahead of me that morning. I thought, I've really caught up. I really caught up. And almost everyone went up and tagged the Matterhorn and then came back down the Zermatt Valley to cross the Rhone and get on the other side and keep going. But my supporter, Bruce, just kept sending me messages as they were watching me going into there, like, don't come back down here. The valley winds were cranking up from the west. And so I just stayed high. I got a big, tall climb over the glacier and just bobbled across the top of, above, on the Sion side, I mean, of the, the south side of the Rhone, but you'd kind of take a beating on each one of those fins. And then eventually I just lobbed into Verbier, which is kind of where one of the places I learned in the Alps, years ago. So that was very special, late in the day, just looking down. Oh, I know this place.
Yeah. Oh, amazing. Yeah. Well, I mean, the line we took, Chris and I, was with my mate, Chris Ashdown. We'd spent, I'd spent a couple of nights in Verbier. The day before had been pretty rubbish weather. And actually, my Vol Bivs are not sort of purists. Are not
sure
necessarily camping camping every night. If I remember, there's an apartment that my brother's wife's family own in Verbier. I'm gonna use it, and I did. So I pitched up there for a couple of nights. Then the day of the flight, Chris and I hiked up to the takeoff. It's quite a decent hike. It's like 3 hours. I don't know how many meters vertical. I mean, you'd do it in half the time, Gavin. But for us, it was
that's a pull.
Like a good old hike.
Yeah.
But so we met these couple of Swiss pilots up on takeoff, and they in fact suggested flying to Bellinzona. So we thought, why not? It seemed like a sensible plan because the forecast for the next few days was windy in the western and northern Switzerland. So getting down south and using that as an entry into Italy sounded like a good plan. We just we hopped over the Sion Valley from Verbier as the first move. We took off about midday, and then it's pretty straightforward sort of route all the way up to Fiche, and we hopped south over the Rhone Valley just past Fiche and over. I can't remember the name of the pass.
Newfoundland.
It is the Newfoundland.
Yep.
Yeah, I don't know. How do you say that?
I don't know if I'm saying it right either, but Newfoundland. Yeah. I call it the Newfoundland Pass. Yeah.
Okay, and that takes you into the Arola Valley.
Yep.
And so that going over the pass was spectacular. Some high peaks.
Yeah, that's beautiful in there.
It was lovely. It was question. We didn't quite know. I mean, Chris was a few K behind me at this point. I was just on my own. I didn't know quite where to go. There wasn't much working there, and it wasn't actually until I got into the Arola Valley that started finding good climbs again. And just followed the valley down, and after 7 3/4 hours, I was in Bellinzona.
Glorious.
I couldn't believe it. I just, that was my
glorious
furthest ever flight in the Alps, the longest in the air, and just sat down in the landing field, just go, wow, It was incredible. Yeah,
that's a special feeling. How were you?
But the thing is, I was happy to, I'm happy to land there because I didn't think the forecast was that good for the next day, and I thought I'd just do a bit of sightseeing around Bellinzona. But actually, that whole business of being in a sort of more built-up area, a town, carrying your rucksack around 23 kilos, everything came to. It's quite difficult, really. So, I don't know what had it. Well, I ended up not even thinking about sightseeing. I was just going to go and hike, and then I turned around and my plans changed, and I got the gondola up and then had that really nice flight. But it's always difficult if you end up low down and you're in a town. Like later on in that trip, I ended up in Levico Terme in the evening. And where the hell do you find somewhere to, pitch a tent in a town? And so on that occasion, I hiked up a hill. I started hiking towards takeoff only a little bit, and then there was this old house that was being renovated and had like a cement mixer in it, and I think there was a digger somewhere and some building waste, and I just sort of tucked myself around the side on a bit of grass. So that wasn't very glamorous that night. So you have to take the rough with the smooth.
Yeah, and I mean, style is important to it, isn't it? I mean, the Alps are just so well suited for what we're talking about. but it is nice to avoid that if you can, because it really takes you out of it. I mean, this is the thing I can't stand about the X Alps, and this isn't a sustainable attitude, because obviously you want to get to Monaco. That's the point. But getting to Monaco in 2015, you've just had this. You're in the mountains, proper Alps, and it's just so beautiful and so spectacular, and all these fun little villages and huts and peaks, and then you get to Monaco. It doesn't add up. It's really disorienting.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And you're just in this concrete jungle. So yeah, and so if you can bypass places like Bellinzona, all the better. And that takes me to the question, which is, how important is top landing? And let's talk about skills a little bit, because I do feel like skills and weather. I want to ask you kind of how you also navigate and deal with weather, you just getting it on your phone, that kind of thing. So I'm asking too many questions here, but talk about all that. Let's talk about the skill side a little bit.
Yeah, well, this year, last trip, we sort of opened it up to try and encourage, people like I was a few years ago who fancied giving Vol Biv a go, but hadn't quite plucked up the sort of courage to do it, to give them a chance to do it in as part of a group. And so you do need to have flown in the Alps, into mountains. You've got to have a more than just a passing understanding of valley winds and the weather conditions in the Alps, because it's not just like going off on a downwind cross country in the UK where you can just land anywhere. You've got to be aware of your surroundings, aware of the terrain, aware of what the wind's doing. And I've got it wrong a couple of times, flown into places where, in hindsight, pretty stupid. But yeah, we all make mistakes.
Yeah, that's almost unavoidable, really. I mean, I think that's definitely something you should know before you start. If you're doing a bivvy, you're going to most likely get into a position where you're not that psyched with.
Yeah, but I mean, one guy on our trip a couple of years ago, he had flown some good distances out in Beer, I think it was, but it didn't really prepare him for the complexity of the Alps. So yeah, we wouldn't want anyone coming on a trip with who's not flown in the Alps before. I mean, I do some competitions out there, like the what are the various little competitions? The Shabra Open at Lorania. Get a feel for flying in that part of the world. There's quite a few of those sort of intermediate level comps that will give you a good understanding of what's going on out there. I mean, in terms of skills, sort of flying skills, I mean, like you always say, top landing is the ability to do that is paramount. But there's always places to land. You don't have to top land. You can land down in the valleys. But I mean, I'm not saying we all need to have Kriegel or Patrick von Cannell's skills at sort of fly on the wall landings. However nice it would be to have them. We're not preparing for the X Alps here, are we? Well, you are, of course. But for us, it's not that critical just on a regular little Vol Biv trip. So you're picking sensible places to land rather than, whoa, there's a postage stamp, I need to land here or else I'm down in the valley bottom. We're not quite doing the same thing.
I would put out a little listener, just a heads up, and maybe a PSA here real quick, that I know many of you listening probably follow Kriegel and Patrick, and they've been doing this top landing challenge thing, and it's all just unreal. It's awesome what these guys are doing. I've been working really hard at this kind of for the last 6 months, and I will just put out there that this is super top level. It's not necessary. You don't need to learn how to top land like that. And I would just put a warning that this is extremely top level flying that these guys are doing and showing, and they're obviously, they're not bragging, they're not putting it out there to try to inspire other people to do it, I don't think. And so don't be overly inspired to go learn that. It's an awesome skill. It's great to have in your toolkit, of course, but it's not really necessary to do, awesome bivvies. I had no idea that this even existed for all the big bivvies that I've done. I'd never seen that or even thought about it. And yeah, just heads up. You get that timing wrong,
Yeah.
it is really extreme.
You're totally right there. I mean, yeah, I've never needed to do anything like that.
No,
so,
no.
yeah. I mean, in terms of weather forecasting, yeah, we use Meteo Parapont, which was, I mean, it's the information is presented in a really nice, easy, understandable way. As to whether it's accurate or not, I don't know. One of the days on this trip, it was forecasting really strong winds in the Trento Valley, and I got there, and there was nothing really, and it sort of slightly changed my plans. I end up sort of landing when maybe I needn't have landed. I guess you don't want to just use one source. We were also looking at soaring meteo as well. It's a little more complex, but that gives you a good overview a few days out, looking at thermal quality. What other ones? Sometimes, yeah, just getting an overview of the weather. Sometimes just whether it's sunny or not is going to be all you need. So Meteo Swiss is a good app actually. Yeah, that gives you,
that's great.
That gives you winds, actual wind speeds in the valleys, which is nice to know.
Yeah, I was going to say, are you checking anything on the fly?
Well, yes, sometimes. Like this year I had a flight from Saint-Beuve to sort of just past Martigny, ended up landing in the Sion Valley, made a little bit of a mistake there in my route choice or decision making at the very end. And so, but before I reached that decision point, I had opened up the Meteo Swiss app and had checked the winds in Sion, and I could see that it was like 20 kilometers an hour. So I thought, well, that's fine. If I do end up landing down in the valley there, it's going to be manageable. And on that Bellinzona flight as well, I was checking the winds as I was sort of going down that Arola Valley towards Bellinzona.
And what are you using for that? Are you using Wind Alert or Meteo Swiss?
Meteo Swiss, yeah. I mean, if there's...
That's terrific.
Alert. Yeah, there's another one that someone told me about. Can't remember what it is offhand, but it may have been that Wind Alert one. Was that... As far as I know, it's mainly Switzerland that has these sort of valley winds.
I've usually when I'm in Europe, I'm using the Meteo Swiss. It's really terrific. I mean, I think the point here for those who haven't flown in the Alps is that valley winds can often be an issue, and they're not an issue if you know about them because you just land high, side land, or you just don't subject yourself to them, and it's no problem. So I think it's a good thing to be observing if you can. And that's a whole nother skill level, checking your phone and tapping into all that kind of stuff. But having some of that tech really helps. And like you said, I mean, in terms of the accuracy or non-accuracy, in 2015, we did it on the fly. My buddy Bruce did all the weather. In 2017 and 2019, we had an actual weather pro, who was supporting a couple other pilots he has in every race since the beginning, since 2003. And he's a proper, Meteo France. He's a pilot and a Meteo France weather forecaster lives in Chamonix. So he's got the 8 screens going and the whole thing. And this isn't a knock against him whatsoever, but, he provides valuable information, but the accuracy of it is not much better than what you get from the apps, really. I mean, and it's often just not accurate. I mean, what we're dealing with, and that, again, it's not a knock on him at all. It's more that we're flying in the micro part of our climate, which a lot of the weather models just don't pick up. We're being affected by a lot of things at the micro level that the models aren't going to get and often don't get it right. So you kind of, like you said, you kind of got to go to know. Would you
Yeah,
agree?
yeah, yeah. It's a lot of it is just observation of what's actually happening in the air around you, and on the horizon. And one thing I learned slightly to my cost last year, 2019. I ended up on that bivvy trip, end up in Andermatt, and I'd flown that day from just near Fish actually.
No, so up and over the Furka and
so I'd taken off at Fish, and actually it wasn't the best of conditions, so we didn't get. Oh yeah, we went over the Furka Pass. That's right, over the Furka Pass, and then got to Andermatt, and there's a couple of windmills, wind turbines on the hill to the north of Andermatt, and I was trying to, as I was approaching them, I was looking, seeing which way they were turning around. I was trying to work out, well, they're going, they were actually going anti-clockwise, but I was just trying to work out, can you tell, without knowing which way they turn, whether they're facing into wind or not, relative to you. And because the previous year I'd done a similar flight from Fish and had soared up that south-facing slope underneath these turbines, I sort of convinced myself that that's what the wind was doing, rather than the wind normally hits Andermatt, comes from the north there. And anyway, so these wind, I last year then I ended up getting into a bit of rotor just by these turbines.
Ugh.
Yeah, well, not just by them,
Yeah.
I was well away from them, but in that vicinity, the wind was clearly coming from the north, and I'd sort of convinced myself based on past experience that it's probably going to be working there. It's a south-facing slope, and those turbines must be just reflecting the anabatic wind blowing up the slope. And so a bit of rotor, and I thought that was the end of sort of like 8 days. I thought, okay, I'll just go and land now. Let's call that a day.
Done.
I had a good run of it.
Right.
But there is a rule, because wind turbines do always rotate clockwise when they are facing into the wind, sort of if you're viewing it from in front of them, as it were. So to try and summarize that, if you're looking at a wind turbine and it's going around clockwise, then the wind is blowing from you towards it. And if I just known that simple rule, I would have known not to go into that little area.
Ah, I didn't know that. That's interesting.
Yeah, so they all turn clockwise when facing into the wind, when you look at them from in front.
So yeah, because they don't swivel, right? So what you're saying is if they're
oh yeah, no, they do swivel.
Oh, they do. Okay.
But they only go round one way.
Ah, okay. I'm with you. Yeah, because we were dealing with a lot of wind turbines down in Texas. There's a pucker factor there, for sure. They're big, and they look like they're going so slow, but the tips are going at something like 205 miles an hour, 105 miles. They're going really fast. They're moving. You don't want to play with those things.
No. I mean, this the whole. People have discussed about, what's the turbines like behind them, but I sort of think it's not quite as bad as you think, because it's not pushing air. It's actually, moving energy from the air, isn't it?
Yeah. So, I just don't know that we want to drop ourselves into there and find out.
No, not out of choice, but they are often good trigger points.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, definitely. No, they saved me quite a few times in Texas, but then they didn't sometimes too. So then you're like, oh, get to a road. So take me back to that first, the big trip you did with Nigel. When you got done, what were the things you put in your notebook? Okay, well, we got to do that differently next time. Gear or food or route or anything?
I think I sort of refined gear a little bit, but you're always sort of doing that. But the route, again, we didn't have a set route in mind. We were sort of flexible. No, I did a trip the following year, and I think pretty much everything I took was the same as the previous year. I think this something we sort of found out on this year's trip. We found ourselves after day one split up into sort of three pairs of two, and that was all fine because we all had company. But then at the end of the second day, I had a fantastic flight. I landed in Eugene. Chris was, I don't know, maybe 40 minutes behind me. I didn't know where he was. I wasn't seeing him on live track. He didn't know where I was. Our radios weren't really working because I was now down in the valley. I did hear him just as I was coming into land at Eugene, but I wasn't in a position to reply. And it ended up he went up a different valley. He flew about the same distance. But had we been in touch, he could have landed with me, and we would have had a night together and had a cool flight not a couple of days later. So comms in the air is definitely something that I think we could improve on. Definitely live tracking. Everyone needs to have that up and running and working. I know the FLAM devices help with the sort of shorter range, seeing where your mates are, but that's sort of in its infancy, really, because I know apps like Fly Sky High, at the moment you can't allocate a name to a FLAM ID, so you just see the sort of arrow on the screen, so you don't know who it is. But Live Track 24 is probably the way to go. But plus having an alternative, easy to use means of communicating in the air without necessarily relying on radios. And I know, Gavin, you mentioned in was it your recent one about an app that you were using for like two-way, like a walkie-talkie app?
Yeah, Zello. We use Zello, and there's others, but it's basically just turning your phone into a radio.
Yeah, and I know you're not going to have internet the whole time, but
yeah, but you know what it does is it stores it, so you can. They've got these little, I've always just used it from the phone, but they've actually got a little push button you can just put on your helmet. So it Bluetooths to your phone, and we always just set up a Zello group before we go flying. And we use that here where we've got 5% of the cell that you do in the Alps. So, I mean, there are places for sure, like you said, in the Alps where you're down in a canyon or something, you don't have cell, but it's, for the most part, it's pretty good. And you just hit that button on the side of your helmet like you're hitting a radio, and it'll put that message to the group if you've got it set up that way, or to one person. So if I'm just flying with Revis or somebody, it'll just be Revis and I. But the nice thing about it is it also saves it. So if you're not in cell and you just press the button, it'll record that. And as soon as you are and they are, there's obviously a two-way thing here, then that person will get it. So that's really nice. We use it a lot in the race because we don't use a radio in the race. It's too much weight. And so that's kind of how we're communicating. I like that a lot more than using, a Telegram or a WhatsApp. But another thing that we utilize quite a bit when we're flying for location and that kind of thing, like you said, the Fly Sky High is great, or the live track is great, but we'll turn on share your live position for 8 hours kind of thing in Telegram. So again, we'll make a Telegram group, same as we would with like the Zello, but we'll just make a Telegram group with just the pilots we're flying with that day. This is really handy in terms of for emergency and that kind of thing too. It's super helpful. It just makes it quick. And then you can just share your location. Now, the only downside is you're burning a lot of juice, so you've got to have your phone connected to an external battery. So yeah. I've never used.
But are you burning more juice than if you're using it?
I don't think so. I don't know. I don't know.
Using Fly Sky High or XC Track anyway.
Yeah, I've never actually done it just seems like it's burning through more battery, but is it actually? I don't know. I've always got that. I use that same battery you do, that Anchor 10,000 milliamp. Mm-hmm. It's great, so that'll keep you going all day, no problem. So I don't know if this is a great multi-day solution in a bivvy environment, if you can't charge up your stuff, definitely, I would think it would use more, but those two things, you can do it in WhatsApp or Telegram. We've been using Telegram more. I think Telegram's better at that. But then, and of course, the big qualification here is how good are you with your hands and using the phone in the air? Some people can do it. Revis can do anything on his phone in the air. He's amazing. And I'm less than that. So, so it depends on how much you like to do stuff in the air, but that can be really great because you just click on it and you can instantly see where their last ping was, so it may not be live, but it does help. And it's nice to, especially when you land, to have kind of all those things going, and you can put together the puzzle pretty quick.
Yeah. I mean, in the UK, and actually it's been a few other countries are using it now. We have the thing called XC Retrieve, which uses Telegram, and we've got various different retrieve groups set up around the country. So we've got one in the southwest, sort of my area. We've got Wales. We've got sort of central. We've got Lake District. Blah blah blah. But so when you land, you drop a pin in there, and you can. Your next message is a little message saying, "Packing up, gonna pitch."
Brilliant. Those are great.
To wherever, and you put the sort of hashtag #map on it, and then if you go to a website, xcrt.aero, then you can see all the pins for everyone in the UK, on the same map. So you can, you don't even have to be in the same group as them, but you look on this map, you can see, oh look, Joe Bloggs there has landed down the road from me.
Yeah, go pick
I didn't know that.
Yeah, cool.
And you can click on his pin and then message him, and then you might want to share a taxi, or he might have a retrieve driver, and you can sort of share lifts. So and we use that in our Vol Bivs as well for sort of sharing positions once we've landed, but it's not so you sort of don't tend to use it in the air, although it shows live track 24 positions as well on it, and in reach and spots. So it's pretty flexible, but just having this sharing your live position in Telegram just amongst the little group of people you're flying with, actually that could work quite well. Yeah, I'm going to check. We might try that with some mates
it does.
Next time we're out flying.
It works quite well, and like I said, that the communications app Zello is.
Zello,
I couldn't believe how much we used it in the last race. I mean, it was 99% of our comms. It's unbelievable. It's really great. And it's amazing how well it works here in the West, where we have very little cell. I mean, it'll still, as soon as you got coverage for a minute, it'll boom, boom, boom. They go back and forth, and it's quite useful because radios, like you said, I mean, radios are a must, but I'm not going to carry one in the Alps. And there's times in bivvy where it'd be nice to, not carry that brick. And it's another thing to charge, another thing. But I mean, I think I don't want to discourage people from carrying radios. I think radios are really key, especially when it comes to emergencies. But yeah, there's other stuff that's valuable. For sure, if you're not going to carry a radio, you got to have an inReach anyway, just period. But then an inReach becomes really, really important. That's super handy. But and is this Tim? Is this like a guided thing? Like, are people paying to go on these, or is it just
no?
Mates?
This is. We just called it the Gumball Transalps Rally after that Gumball Trans-America film.
Right.
That sort of race. This isn't a race. It's just an excuse to sort of find some people to go bibbing with. I mean, we did get, you get split up pretty rapidly, and I spent most of that, this last trip on my own, which is fine. But sometimes a bit of company is quite nice. So yeah, the more the merrier on this trip, as far as we're concerned. As long as you've got the relevant experience. If you haven't, then hire a guide and do it with a guide. But no, it's just an idea to
encourage people to do it.
Get more people doing it, really. Yeah.
Neat.
And we've got, within the UK, I set up this Facebook group, the UK Vol Biv pilots, and it started off with like 20 or 30 people, and now there's like 350 or almost 400 people in the group. It's crazy.
Smokes, really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. They're not all British pilots. There's a few, from all the rest of the world.
That's awesome.
Yeah, there's a lot of interest in it, and from my own experience, you just need a little bit of a push to actually give it a go.
I mean,
that was the idea of it. And we're doing another trip this year, or in 2021.
I was going to say, okay, so now that you've done these, you did the first one 2018, 2019. You did one this year in 2022? So this is okay.
Yeah.
What have you refined about timing and where? So where will you go, and what time of the year have you decided is kind of the sweet spot for the next one?
We're still we've got the time. I think we're going to go in July, sort of middle 2 weeks of July probably, but basically sometime in July. We're trying to decide whether to, do the similar route to what we've done before, i.e. from sort of like Saint Andre northwards and then eastwards from Chamonix. That's a logical route, heading west to east, because you've got the general prevailing wind is from the west in those northern Alps. But we quite like the idea of a bit of a change of scenery, maybe, potentially start in Slovenia and go via Austria, and then, head into Switzerland from Austria. So yeah, we're still wondering about that. Or we start in Chamonix and sort of cut out the first sort of 2 or 3 days and just go head east from Chamonix, or Annecy or somewhere like that. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I guess if you're going kind of mid-July, you're starting to orient definitely towards the bigger stuff. You're definitely getting into the time of year where you've got stability can be an issue down in the lowlands, especially on the Italian side. So yeah, you're kind of probably wanting to play with the bigger stuff, getting above the inversions.
Yeah, that's. I mean, a few years ago I did do a little bit of research looking at flights on X Contest. Which I'd pick a sort of area and just see how many flights over 100K were there in each month, and it seemed like May and June, let's say, you get some absolutely mega days in June, but you get more non-flyable days in between. What time you get to July, the weather, it's more settled. It's so it's definitely more reliable, but you don't get such real 5-star days,
right?
Well, you can do. But yeah, the stability can be an issue for sure. In the Albertville Valley, it can get quite stable. Between Grenoble and Albertville, and yeah, like you say, in those Italian sort of lakes regions, it can get pretty stable. Yeah. So yeah, next year maybe try and avoid that bit. But you just go with the flow. If you've got a few days, some windy days further north, then you sort of progress southwards. It's just.
And would you all just, if you've flown into a Venus flytrap area, it just looks terrible for a few days, would you just get on a train and go somewhere else?
Good question. I think we probably would do. Yeah. Just to, like this year, I ended up getting a couple of bus rides to get from where I landed just to the west of Trento to get across to Levico Terme. As it happens, it was pretty stable the next day after that. So made a few kilometers progress, about 40K my final day. But I started slightly kicking myself because I didn't do enough route planning down in that sort of southern Dolomites sort of area. And I should have, from the day before, I should have made my way more to, is it Bolzano? Mm-hmm. And then across into the Dolomites from there. I think I probably would have got some better air. But, you live and learn, don't you?
That's the beautiful thing about it. I mean, and you mentioned beer. You had that pilot that, that there's so many places in the world too where you can do some really neat. I mean, even Colombia, they're doing some really cool bivvies in the Valle de Cauca. I always go down and just race Roldanillo, and do the same thing every time I go. And yeah, I mean, there's been lots of really cool stuff being done down, and it's just flying up and down that valley. But, there's lots of places to topland, and there's, it's cheap, and, there's places like this all over the world that are really fun. But I like that you guys are focusing on the Alps because it's I think you learn a lot, and it's just so friendly for it, isn't it? I mean, you don't have to, you don't have to crack yourself. You can take the gondola, you can take the train, you can take it's just so easy to get around and move pretty quickly. And, you can keep it pretty, you can keep it pretty nice.
Yeah. We're not all hardcore adventurers like you, Gavin, or the likes of Benjamin Jordan. God, have you seen his latest trip?
I just saw that on Instagram. I had no idea he was even doing that last year.
No, he kept that very quiet, didn't he?
Yeah.
God, all the way flying from Mexico up to Canada over, basically half a year it took him.
Yeah, it's the line you would take too. It's holy cow. He would have seen some incredible terrain.
Yeah, I mean, I was definitely sort of missing home comforts after 9 or 10 days, so I was quite glad to get home. A nice comfy bed and nice food again, and see the family, etc., etc. But I mean, God, Ben, you away for 6 months, 5 months. I don't know. That's pretty hardcore.
It is pretty hardcore. Yeah, I'm sure it'd be an entertaining film. Tim, just before we close up here, you've been at this for a long time, 30 years. You've heard this question a million times on the show, but if you could go back or you could rewind the clock to your 50-hour self, or just do it all over again, what would you change?
I'll tell you what, I stopped entering flights in our national cross-country league a couple of years ago, and that was quite liberating. It was nice. I had been, for the last 20 years, religiously putting every flight in the cross-country league and comparing it to other flights, and there was a lot of pressure to be out on the really good days, because otherwise you'd miss out on your points in the XC league. Nowadays, I just put in X contest as a sort of record.
Yeah, like your log.
It's like a log.
Yeah.
So that was a bit of a breakthrough, really, and that sort of coincided with really enjoying the Vol Biv, more sort of adventurous flying.
To me, it's the I mean, we've talked about this quite a bit. The kilometer crunching approach isn't very sustainable, is it? I mean, you really have to.
Yeah.
I mean, I was way into that for a while, and I still do. I mean, we have the U.S. contest, here they just started that the last few years. And, this summer I put a lot of energy into it until Kiwi disappeared, and that kind of took over for us for a while. But, and that was really fun because it forced me to go out and fly things that I hadn't thought about. And that was really neat. But as a lifestyle of the sport, I don't dig it. It just doesn't work. It just puts me into shitty air, and I don't need to do that. I mean, I try to reserve my shitty air for the Alps. There's only so much psychological trauma we can handle, or at least that's how I'm feeling about things these days.
I mean, the UK XC League is a great resource of flight information and everything, and it's fun to see how you're doing comparing yourself to others. But I think my best ever place in the league was I don't know, I can't remember, 8th or 9th a few years ago. But I know that I'm never going to get to the top, but I just don't have the time. And then when you've got like a family christening or a wedding or even just kids' birthday parties or something like that to go to, and it's a beautiful day and you can't go flying, it just sort of all your mates are doing 100Ks and everything. It just makes you unhappy. And why go there if you're not doing the league? All that pressure is lifted off you. You're not missing out on your Tesco points. Points in the league. It's just you just fly for the fun of it, and that's how it should be. So the other thing I wanted to mention was, let me just tell this story. It's back in 2012. I can't believe it's so long ago. April 2012, and the forecast down in the south of England was absolutely rubbish. Forecast up in the Highlands of Scotland was 5-star. So there was about a dozen of us from the south. We all headed up there in a few cars, and we got up to we the night before, and then we got to White Corries, which is a site near Glencoe, on the Saturday morning, and it was just beautiful conditions. I did a nice little triangle out in front first before I sort of worked out what the day was doing. And then I had this plan to fly from White Corries up to sort of Fort William. That's pushing into wind, then trying to get onto basically Ben Nevis, and then fly back to White Corries. And that would have been a really nice little out and return. It didn't quite work like that. I managed to push all the way through into wind up to Fort William, and I just didn't have enough height to get onto the sort of what's it called, Annet Moor range. So I decided to head back, and I got a nice climb out from Fort William. The wind was pushing me southwest, and I was running alongside Loch Linney, which Fort William is at the sort of northernmost end of, and the sky to the west, i.e. to my right as I was flying sort of southwest, was beautiful, and the mountains were beautiful, and it just looked epic. The sky to my east, where I'd come from, was getting a bit overdeveloped and spread out, and I think there were a few spots of rain, and I was such in two minds. Should I just carry on with this thermal that was drifting me over Loch Linney? It was about a kilometre crossing of the loch, and then I'd hit the mountains on the other side. I was just full of doubt. How am I going to get back from there if I cross over the loch? I could see there was a little ferry at Corran, and but I just put all these doubts into my mind. And there was another thing. I'd arranged dinner at this place where we were due to stay that night, and there were other people with me, staying there. And in the end, I wimped out and landed on the eastern side of Loch Linney because I fell out of the thermal, of course, because I couldn't keep with it. And to this day, I regret not just going with my gut and really, going to the good sky on the other side of the loch. Worst that would have happened, I would have had a bit of a walkout. I could have flown another 50 or 60 kilometers and landed on the Isle of Mull. And then that would have been a real adventure, having to get a ferry back, and it would have been a story to dine out on for the rest of time. But I wimped out. So the point of that story is really to just go for it. If you get a chance like that, it doesn't matter what. If you end up having an epic retrieve, that's all part of the fun. Don't wimp out. And for sure, with my lightweight gear that I've got now, I'd absolutely definitely do that. Back in 2012, I was on much heavier gear, so yeah, I guess that was weighing on my mind as well as it would have been weighing on my back. But yeah, that's all I wanted to say, really.
Yeah, there's that seize the day. There are those times, isn't it, where it's just totally appropriate to go for it. Well, I hope you get another opportunity like that. I'm visualizing. I haven't flown anywhere you just said, but I'm visualizing, flying over the locks, and that would have been a crusher. But well, hopefully you'll get another chance.
It's an awesome place to fly. Yeah, I'm dying for another trip up to Scotland. When the weather's good. Up in the Highlands of Scotland, it is unbeatable as a place to fly. You often get 6,000-7,000 foot cloud base, which when the mountains are only 3,000 foot max, you've got huge height over the terrain, and it is just so wild and spectacular. Yeah, it's beautiful.
Yeah, brilliant. I had some of the best flying. Some of the more memorable flying I've ever had. It certainly was, nothing challenging and nothing radical by any means, but, we spent almost a complete summer sailing the Outer Hebrides and Orkney Islands back in 2010, I guess it was. 2011. Summer of 2011. And you could fly anywhere out in the Hebrides. It was unbelievable. You'd anchor in these cool little bays and ride out these storms, and And then, there's no trees or anything. You could just, no matter what direction the wind was, you could hike up, 10 minutes and then soar. It was all soaring. I never did any XC. But I'm sure you
Sure.
could. That'd be pretty neat, to fly from like the northern tip down to Barra or something. But just,
Yeah.
I mean, it was just beyond spectacular all the time. I actually took my mom for a tandem there. She was on the boat for a couple of weeks, and she still talks about it as the best day of her life. It's just awesome.
I can imagine.
Yeah, wicked.
Yeah, it is stunning. Well, next year, hopefully.
Oh man, that would have been good to go.
Yeah, because it was only last year, or no, the year before, 2019, that the first people actually flew to Mull.
Right.
And I reckon I could have done it if I'd just gone for it. But
yeah. Oh
well,
man.
Who knows?
Oh, we've all
who
had
knows?
plenty of those.
It doesn't matter. It was a great flight, whatever. And
yeah, of course.
we were staying at there's a railway line called the West Highland Line, I suppose it is. And a few of us stayed at this old railway station. There was a B&B, and they cooked for us there. And whilst we were there, this great big Pullman, was it? No, the Orient Express, carriages rolled into the station, and it was a wonderful evening there. We had a superb meal, but
brilliant.
Even so,
yeah, brilliant. A great place to end, Tim. That was terrific. It's fun to talk to you after all these years. I mean, we've been in touch since then, but I can't wait to see what you do next. I was actually over in Europe after the race in 2019 and watching your expedition very keenly because it looked like a blast, and it's a great finger of our sport that you can walk out on and really enjoy in a lot of different ways. So I think this will be inspiring for those thinking about doing it. But thanks for sharing your advice. We'll put up your kit list on the in the show notes, and anything else you want to share there. And also I'll provide a link to your great videos. And but thanks, Tim. I appreciate it.
Thanks very much, Gavin. It's been a pleasure talking to you, and thanks for your contribution to the sport through the Cloud-Based Mayhem. It's a fantastic resource, and I look forward to each of the episodes when they come out. So yeah, cheers. Thanks very much.
That was great. Thanks, Tim. I appreciate it. Talk soon. If you find the Cloud-Based Mayhem valuable, you can support it in a lot of different ways. You can give us a rating on iTunes or Stitcher, or however you get your podcast. That goes a long ways and helps spread the word. You can blog about it on your own website or share it on social media. You can talk about it on the way up to launch with your pilot friends. I know a lot of interesting conversations have happened that way. And of course, you can support us financially. This show does take a lot of time, a lot of editing, a lot of storage and music and all kinds of behind the scenes cost. So if you can support us financially, all we've ever asked for is $1 a show. And you can do that through a one-time donation through PayPal, or you can set up a subscription service that charges you for each show that comes out. We put a new show out every 2 weeks. So for example, if you did $1 a show and every 2 weeks, it'd be about $25 a year. So way cheaper than a magazine subscription. And it makes all of this possible. I do not want to fund this show with advertising or sponsors. We get asked about that pretty frequently, but for a whole bunch of different reasons, which I've said many times on the show, I don't want to do that. I don't like having that stuff at the front of the show. And I also want you to know that these are authentic conversations with real people, and these are just our opinions, but our opinions are not being skewed by sponsors or advertising dollars. I think that's a pretty toxic business model. So I hope you dig that. You can support us. If you go to cloudbasedmayhem.com, you can find the places to support. You can do it through patreon.com/cloudbasedmayhem. If you want a recurring subscription, you can also do that directly through the website. We've tried to make it really easy, and that will give you access to all the bonus material, little video casts that we do, and extra little nuggets that we find in conversations that don't make it into the main show, but we feel like you should hear. We don't put any of that behind a paywall. If you can't afford to support us, then just let me know and I'll set you up with an account. Of course, that'll be lifetime, and hopefully you're being in a position someday to be able to support us. But You'll find all that on the website. All of you who have supported us or even joined our newsletter or bought Cloud-Based Mayhem merchandise, t-shirts or hats or anything, you should be all set up. You should have an account, and you should be able to access all that bonus material now. Thank you so much for listening. I really appreciate your support, and we'll see you on the next show. Thank you.